We have a special occasion to listen to man in a similar commitment to change the world. So I had the word to Claudio. If you can introduce your vision.
Well, first of all, thanks to Matthias who made this connection and is responsible in a way for the existence of this event and for my book coming out today. And I think the first thing we have in common here is the point of view that to change the world you need to change people. And it's not the point of view that has been worked with very often in the course of history. Generally, the militant politicians say inner change will come later. And I remember in my teens, already in Chile, seeing a book by Krishnamurti, Individual Peace is the Peace of the World. At least that was the Spanish title, Paz Individual, es la paz del mundo. And I was hit by that idea, but I was too young to make more with it than remembering it. And then I taught in California at an institute that was inheritance of Sri Aurobindo. He designated Haridas Chowdhury to represent him in coming to America. And he had a chair of his work developed into a chair of integral studies, which was under my co-direction for a time. And I became familiar with Aurobindo's integral philosophy, which also influenced Esalen. Esalen was the result of that same dream of Aurobindo when the owner of Esalen, Michael Murphy, came there and he said, I would like to create a space for something like coming together of people on the search, but in a less repressive environment that India, the tradition of India, was very sexually repressive, very puritanical. And California was quite different. And I've always admired very much in the distance the figure of Lycurgus, one of the 7 sages of antiquity. It is said that he went to prepare himself in Egypt before he took on the leadership of the oldest Greek culture, Sparta. And he was convinced that a happy society could only exist when there are virtuous persons. Individual virtue was the basis of a healthy society. But if we want to speak of virtue today, I think we really talk about, we become moralistic. Our notions of virtue are very much influenced by an extrinsic sense of what is right and what is wrong. And I think that that the world would be a better place to be in if our mythical forefathers had not eaten for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Once we had the arrogance to know what's good and what's evil, we have filled prison houses with criminals. And I don't think we are better people for trying to be good. Trying to be good doesn't make us better. I think I have talked enough. I should leave a space for dialogue before it gets longer.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, when we prepared this talk this afternoon, I realized that it will be probably quite difficult to find something to fight about, because I think there are really many aspects, and you gave me a lot of wonderful triggers now that allow me to respond. Maybe first of all to the initial question, changing the world. If it comes to changing the world, I'm pretty relaxed, because I believe very much in this famous sentence of Gandhi, who said, "Be the change that you want to see in a world." And I realize I am, therefore I am changing the world. So it's quite clear that the world changes because I am. The more difficult question is, how do I contribute to that? What kind of change am I for this world? And this leads me to one of the, I think, most difficult questions here, the question of self-awareness in peace work. You mentioned two of the heroes, of the pillars of, I think, international contemporary peace thought, Aurobindo, Krishnamurti. And I remember also the same book, and of course the same sentences and the same teaching that we get from Krishnamurti. And I also remember how disputed it was in the time, in the hot phase of the peace movement in the 80s. Because many people who came from this structuralist background, who knew exactly what is good and what is bad, the ones who said, okay, we need a revolution, meaning a material, a societal revolution in the sense of a new distribution of goods, of a new structure, political structure, new distribution, and new participation ways of power, and so on.
Wolfgang, it's very hard for us, we are not professional, to translate. Can you go just
slowly?
You too.
Okay. Okay. A lot of work. Yeah. Okay. So I refer to the dispute about Krishnamurti's sentence or Krishnamurti's teaching that peace begins within yourself. That many people who wanted to make a political or an economic change said, okay, if we do that, that means that everyone sits on his or her island, isolates himself from society, lives somewhere in a spaceship or whatsoever, and nothing will happen politically. The bad ones, the capitalists, the dictators, they will continue dominating the world. And I think it is very important to go deeper into this dispute, into this debate. And one of the things that fascinates me and that makes me so happy and proud to be tonight here with you and to have this dialogue is that I'm deeply convinced that the relation of inner peace and external peace cannot be separated if you want to be serious in peace work. So in the program that I'm directing, we have the principle that we say if you study there, the main topic of interest in your studies as a student is yourself. Which means if we talk about peace, okay, first question, what is peace as seen from your personal perspective? And don't define it in a negative way. So don't tell us peace is the absence of conflict. Can't be. Conflict is a natural thing. In human relations, you will always have conflicts. So is it possible? Can we only have peace if we are separated? And can I be in peace with myself without conflict in myself, even if I'm totally isolated? Don't we have the experience that as soon as I'm alone, I start to fight with myself? These wonderful voices inside my head that argue against each other. Is that peace? So the absence of conflict probably is not a good definition. Then some people say, okay, conflict in the sense of we have different opinions, we argue about that. fine. So then, peace is the opposite, or is the absence of violence. So we have conflicts, but the question is how to deal with conflicts, and at least in a non-violent way. Okay, the remaining question is, and what is peace? If peace is nothing but a negation, nothing but an absence of something bad, then it's the remaining good thing, the rest of good things in this world. I think it's quite a poor peace. And if we forget about these negations and say, and what is peace? Then we are in very deep troubles, because then we have to define it in a positive way, and we have to treat this question seriously. And I, again, repeat, I'm very happy to share that with you. I think we both refer to Krishnamurti, and it is very much with that. And I agree very much with you with this focus on inner peace, not as the opposite of the external peace, but as a connection with it.
When you ask what is peace, it's not that I want to give a definition, but I think of Pascal when he says, the problem with the world is that everybody is messing up with somebody else because of an inability to be still at home. People are unable to be still with themselves, in stillness. I think he must have had an experience a little bit like shamatha, or like yoga in meditation, where you are in such enjoyment of being deeply with yourself. The mind, so to say, goes home inside, goes to its own center, that then that is more interesting than the agitation of the world, the agitation of the small passions. So I think I like your objection to the going beyond peace as opposite of conflict, or peace as opposite of violence. But I think the peace as opposite to sickness may be more valid. Peace is what remains when we are whole, when we are as according to our nature. Of course, we don't know what it's like to be according to our nature, because since we have historical records, we have been already sickened by reactions to all kinds of historical traumas. But I work with the idea that ethical problems have to do not with extrinsic right and wrong, with something, but with something like being in tune with an inner nature. And I have been particularly interested in what's originally about my book, in one idea that our nature is a kind of inner trinity. Just like the Taoists say, we humans are a bridge between the heaven and the earth. I think we are like the sons of a heavenly Father and a Mother Earth. It's as if two different principles, an embodied principle, the material part, and a spiritual principle that are mysteriously united in our nature if we become whole. But I think I should stop again. Because the next thing I should say is to acknowledge the person I got this idea from. And that's telling us a longer story, like that, to tell the anecdote of how this was a very exciting idea that came into my youth, and it's taken me a lifetime to understand it.
Yeah, well, I'm very keen to hear this story. But maybe if you just allow me,
yes, please,
because it should be a talk, just to describe this threefold structure of peace. With my words, again, I think it's not a disagreement, it's just another way to tell the same story. If we accept that peace has to be a value in itself that is not defined by its opposite, we will understand that conflict, and especially violence, a violent attempt to resolve the conflict, is not the opposite of peace, but is the consequence of the absence of peace. So, if we accept that, the question is, what is peace then?
You tell me.
And
you seem to have a...
Yeah, well, I have a proposal. I don't have an answer, because I don't want to impose my views on other people, but I have a proposal, which is, I think that is quite helpful to think peace as a relational phenomenon, and therefore defining it as being connected. And here the threefold thing comes back.
Yes.
I think first, be connected with yourself. So be who you are, have an understanding with yourself, and feel an internal harmony. And if it's not there, well, work on that. So be aware of yourself. Then in a second step, as it is a relational phenomenon, to be connected with the others, who are people who are really around you, concrete people, groups of people, people you meet, people who interact with you. So be really connected, as you are one who is able to feel him or herself. You have also the empathy, the potential for empathy, and you realize this potential for being connected to the others. And the third layer would be connected to what I call here the all one existence as a principle, the universally related, interrelated existence, this web of existence. So again, be aware of that. I personally, coming from a Catholic background, do not like too much this idea of Father in heaven, not as a philosophical principle. I can live with that as a philosophical principle, but I'm somehow traumatized by the popular understanding of this Father in heaven.
Yes.
And I think it makes an enormous difference where we think really of a personalized being out there that creates us, knows everything, dominates everything, judges everything, knows what is right and what is wrong, and punishes or rewards us for that. Or if we imagine sort of an universal, and if you want, you can call it divine energy, but definitely not personalized and not judging, not punishing. That's, I think, for my understanding of peace, on this threefold definition of being connected with a very important thing. I love to be, I have this feeling, this meditative feeling of being connected to existence, to divine energy. I don't want to fear God.
Now I need to apologize that I have nothing against you. It's not the most entertaining talk, but it's no point. I like the Aristotelian word for virtue, eudaimonia, which has an implication of pleasure, serenity, well-being. And I think when we are okay, we do what's okay. Like Lao Tse says in his Tao Te Ching, it's called the Book of the Tao and its Virtue. If we are connected to the Tao, we connected to the universal principle, as you were calling it, or something like that, then automatically what flows from us, what we do, is right, not because of an external reference, as written or unwritten laws or customs, but because it's just a good functioning of our organism. But this morning I was talking to most of the people who are here and saying, and inviting them to explore a theory of suffering according to which we suffer because we don't find ourselves, we don't find our being, we don't have a sense of existence. We only identify with what we do or what we think or what we feel, but not what we are. And I didn't mention what I'm going to say now, but I think we don't feel I am because we are not whole. We have our thinking brain that is separate from our feeling brain and separate from our doing brain. Our instinctual life is mostly repressed or domesticated rather in the civilized world. And so who can say I when we are all divided inside with internal splitting? I think that only the whole of our being can say I am. And our parts don't have the ability. We are just a thinking machine, a feeling machine, doing machine perhaps, for instinctual. So I say this in turn as a form of agreement with interconnectedness. Not connectedness to our hypothetical self, but connected of our disjointed parts, so they can become a self. Now, this idea fits very well with the idea of the person who had this great influence in my youth. I had two great influences in my youth. One was Gurdjieff, whom I didn't meet personally. I met persons who were steeped in his ideas, and I became part of his school when he had already died. And the central idea, the Gurdjieff school was called Center for the Harmonious Development of Man. Today it might be better to call it harmonious development of human beings. But it meant the union of what he called three centers: the thinking center, feeling center, the somatic part of ourselves. And simultaneously I was in contact with a person who had come to the same vision independently and was not somebody who read social philosophy, nor somebody who had known the Gurdjieff work, somebody who in his life had integrated what he called the inner father, the inner mother, and the inner child. Now, influence is a somewhat mysterious thing. We can come across the most interesting ideas and not be receptive to them, and sometimes our nose is deeply interested. I want to know more about this. I don't know whether somebody here has heard me talk about how I met this man who's called Totil Albert. I don't think I have told that story. Oh, you I did? Yes.
No, it is in your book.
Huh?
It's in your latest book, Feelings Realization.
I thought about how I met you. How did I meet you?
I think we're walking in a park.
Exactly. I didn't know I had written about that. I shouldn't repeat myself. What about I need to make it part of this. I was a schoolboy, last year of high school, I recognized him and he recognized me because he had been at my mother's house. My mother had a very artistic environment, and somebody had brought Totila Albert along as an artist. He was a sculptor. He was best known sculptor in Chile. And he says, "How are you?" And in those years I was almost autistic. I never knew what to say to a question like that. It wouldn't have occurred to me to give a very honest answer. But I don't think I knew. I had access to the answer. How am I? How am I? So, okay, I said. I sometimes say okay today, even after so many years. But he really wanted to know us. But tell me something about yourself. And I must have been 15, 16 years old. And I had nothing more interesting I could think of than something I had written in the school magazine. That there would be a new Renaissance, that it would not be around art like the European Renaissance, but around psychology, that its center would not be in Italy, but now in Bolivia or Americas, which was why I became so interested in a teacher called Oscar Chazo that came from Bolivia, but much later, because I had predicted it. I had written this irresponsibly. It's the first time I felt something like inspiration. It just flowed from me. And I never thought to document what arguments do I have. It was like a vision. So I described this to him of his new Renaissance, and he somehow moved his head sadly and said, "I wish I could be so optimistic like you are." This was the 40s, still the 40s, very early, late 40s maybe. That's my school years. I have to calculate a long time ago. And so I said, "So you don't think that this is true?" I think the world is very crazy. I think our species might self-destroy if something doesn't change. Now, nobody talked about in this way then that I know. And I felt this man knows what he's talking about. And I began to milk him for understanding. I became a friend and follower, a little bit like some of Socrates' contemporaries followed him and watched everything he did and every word he came out. And it was a friendship of many years. This was when I was maybe 16, and he died. I must have been in my early 30s. He was in his 70s when he died. And he had already had a brain stroke. It was half the body paralyzed. And he says goodbye to me at the door of his house. It was very few days before his death. And he says, "Goodbye, Totila." And I thought that he was confused because of brain damage, because of his hemiplegia. And he saw my hesitation and said, "No, now you are Totila, I go." And then I say to him, "How can I represent you? How can I be like you, since I don't understand the things you say? You talk about the three, the message of the three." And I try, and I ask you questions, but I really don't know experientially what you're talking about. And then you are somebody who has gone through a death and a rebirth, and you compare yourself to Orpheus, who has gone down to hell and come back through your art and through love to somebody. So far from these things. And he said to me, you only need one thing, but you don't have to look for it. It comes to us. Suffering. It will come to you when you are 36. And when I was 36, I lost my only child. And I didn't realize I was 36 until about a month later. I was weeping and weeping. Nothing in my life has touched me so deeply. And nothing could touch me so deeply because I was so alienated from my feelings. It was the beginning of my spiritual life, and that death, he was right in that another life started. And still, I couldn't say that I understood him much better. Something started in me, and it's been many, many years, and in recent times, I begin to know enough about the world to give my own interpretation of his idea. And he saw the world as being sick and crazy then. Now it's obvious to everybody. It's like as if he was so much ahead of his time. And his idea was essentially, he was an enemy of patriarchy, I would say. Bachhofen, who discovered Mutterrecht, he was not critical of patriarchy. He thought, like everybody else, that this is a step forward. Civilization, the calendar, arithmetic, the stars, writing. So, before the feminist movement started, because the feminist movement was interested in patriarchy as something bad for women. But today I was thinking this is the root cause of all our social and inner problems. So little by little I have come to interpret what we call neurosis as basically complications of the patriarchal mind. That's been my interest in this book.
I think, Claudio, it would be very interesting for the people here if you can share how we can concretely work on ourselves, looking
from this influence, this has been an influence behind what many people here know as the SAT program. And we work on the integration of father, mother, and child in the family. It's a holistic program in the sense that it's not intellectual, but mostly level of feelings, and much of it has to do with instinctual liberation, of recovering spontaneity. And everybody here knows how important what we have been doing is spontaneous movement, letting go. All the psychological techniques and spiritual techniques have to do with precise instructions in general. There's very little space for the Dionysian ingredient of what gets worked out by itself by just letting it come out. So I have become very enthusiastic about Nietzsche's prediction, saying what you need for fossilized Christianity is the Dionysian spirit, liberation of the natural. So,
can you say something more about your program?
Yeah, well, first of all, again, Nietzsche is in fact one of our competitors, so
yes.
no disagreement. But in trying to answer also this question, what can somebody do and what are the things that we offer in our programs? I think that in general there are a lot of experiences and therefore different schools who have the same intentions and have just different ways or different stories, different methods to go into the same direction. This would also have been a question from me to you about the Enneagram, whether you would say or agree with me also in this point that it is one possibility of analysis of ideal types, for using such a word, and screening in a way our existence in order to find harmony, internal harmony, external harmony. And I'm still with your question. I think this is how I understood it. I'm not an expert in it, sorry for that, and I will learn more about that, but this was my first impression that it is about that, and that this has also a lot to do, as you mentioned, this father, mother, child thing. It reminds me very much of the shamanic traditions that also go into this triangle, but see it as an equator with a fourth angle, because they distinguish between the boy and the girl. So the me is the adult, male and female, and the child, male and female, and integrates that all. So it's another story, but I think pretty much the same intention. And now if you ask us about our system, I have spies here in the group, and the spies told me that this morning we talked about the chakra system. And slower.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So, okay, my spies here in this group, I emphasize that. Yes, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so the spies here in the group told me that this morning you talked about the chakra system. And I think, well, not I think, but when we're answering your question, what we are doing is that we apply this very conventional structure of the 7 chakras for the analysis of conflict in general, of the personality, the same 3 things again, of relations to other people, and well, of the all one, if you want to call it that way. And we follow the centric principle, inside equals outside, and the second principle, resonance. So this is how we just, the frame that we use, and then we go along this chakra structure from what we call the episode, which is the visible part of a conflict. So there's a story, somebody is fighting about this and that, be it a couple in a domestic violence case or be it an international conflict, always the same, we have a story at the surface. And then we follow this structure, these layers of the chakra system, and say, always watch both sides, internal and external, of the parties. And as a conflict worker, as we are all interconnected, as soon as you start to be interested in the conflict, you become a part of the system, of this dysfunctional system. So you are not the doctor who treats from outside the sickness conflict, but you relate to the parties, and your appearance, your performance in the conflict will make a difference. And will make a transformation and will not create a resolution. Now the layers, I don't want talk too long, so therefore I don't go through it all, but I think it's quite known here. For example, first layer, well, the first layer, the first chakra would be the episode, the surface. And then what is immediately behind the surface? This is, according to this elicitive approach, which how we call it, would be the second chakra, standing for the internal sexual and external familiar component of the personality. Which means I cannot separate these 2 things. The performance of the party, including myself, in a dysfunctional system might be, first check so to say, might be out of balance on this layer, which means if there is something dysfunctional in a family system, I can't expect that something internally will be out of balance on the sexual layer, the sexual aspect. They are interrelated. Quite clear why. Because in the development of a person, my sexual understanding of the world, or this understanding of my own sexuality, of course depends from the value system and from the real conditions that surround me in my family. Yeah, they educate me in that. And vice versa, my real sexual performance will influence my actual family system. So the two things are interrelated, and it will be very difficult in an applied conflict work to say, well, I focus only on the, let's say, father-son relation, and I do not take into consideration the internal aspects that might be out of balance in these personalities. I don't know whether this is clear. I just want to give this one simple example. I think it's quite obvious. And then we can continue along this structure of chakras and can say the internal need to belong to a group, this feeling I belong, it's socially warm around me. This is a need, this is inside of me, this is what I want to perceive. This is not an objective truth. I feel it. And whether I'm satisfied or not is a personal, individual feeling. It's not an emotion, it's a feeling. And outside my neighborhood, my concrete environment will respond, that will resonate with that. And if this is in harmony, I will feel peace. If there's something unbalanced, both sides will be unbalanced because I feel unrest inside myself, and my performance will create unrest in my surrounding, and so on. Again, I don't want to do the complete speech, but this is the principle, the centric principle, inside equals outside, principle of resonance and principle of correspondence, and then this wonderful word homeostasis, in the sense of what to do, well, balance it. Yeah. So this is dynamic. There is no static balance in the end, and then we have peace and it's fine. No, this is a permanent, ongoing dynamic. We go in balance, out balance, and we are happy if we have more or less a circulation around zero in this. Yeah. So that's how we deal with it. So
You have asked both of us how we work, and I'd like to try saying it again differently. My reaction to you have a complicated theory, and mine is very, very simple. That we have these three brains, an intellectual brain, which is like the father principle because it has natural authority on the rest of us. It's like at the head of everything in our system. And the emotional brain and the so-called reptilian brain, the instinctual brain, which like the inner child before culture. I would say the patriarchal mind is like the imperialism of reason in our world, with a suffocation, with a choking of empathy and mother-like caring, compassion, and with more than a postponement, with an antagonism to the instinctual life. This instinctual life is sort of squashed. So I think we need a kind of education to compensate very simply this kind of factor. An education of love, an education of a liberation of instinctual life. I would say that's what basically I try to do. Only that to get people to be able to liberate their loving potential, one needs a lot of self-awareness. We need to penetrate into the sickness, to do away with this obstacle. We are, I take the position, we are loving beings. We are essentially compassionate and even reverent. We are appreciative and we go for pleasure. But all these are complicated because of things that need to be understood if we are to be transcendent. So a lot of what I do is self-awareness, but for the purpose of liberating both the instinctual spontaneity and to liberate love.
Maybe Claudio would be interested to complete this with your social point of view and the connection between the personalities and the social sickness.
Well, I have elaborated on what I call the enneagram of society, the projection of what the Christians used to call the deadly sins, the cardinal sins. And there was a lot of insight in the fathers of the desert. This was not formulated by monks in the context of social life, but by anachorites looking at what made them, what got in the way of their religious experience. And so they came up with things such as pride and anger and so forth. So I have elaborated on the social projections of these passions, like the passion of anger has something to do with the patricians, with the aristocrats, the oligarchs, and today with the new conservatives, and the 9-point of the enneagram, which is like, it's called laziness, but it's inner laziness. Acedia, I connect to the status quo with conformity. So it's a little bit obvious, but it's a way of putting order into what I call the sins of society. But mostly my interest in the social has been in education, because it's very hard to heal grown-ups. A child physician knows how easily children respond to medicine. Children are healed in a year, in a day or two of very serious disturbances. And psychologically, there's more hope dealing. And we have created a system of compulsory education. The channel is there. So I thought maybe better than Illich's proposal of deschooling, use the old bottles for new wine, use the compulsory education, but for another kind of education. An education to transcend patriarchy through recovering the spontaneity of the child and creating a context more of mothering than of paternal demands, which are mostly geared to production, not for personal development. I got very angry in my years of militancy to change education, because I got the sense that education is the invisible partner of the military-industrial complex. That education is geared to keep people asleep and to serve production and not create trouble. And I couldn't have never come to this conclusion if I had not come to the resistances to any attempt to change. It seems all very innocent, as if it were just ignorance. But when you try to change it, you see as if some will there to